All right, what is up? This is part two of the 2020 election preview. If you have not seen part one, click right here. Oh my God, I don't have hands. The filter. Click up. You know what? There's no way that I'm actually going to put a little box. You know how YouTubers have a little box or like the link that I don't know how to do that. If you want to watch part one, I'll put it in the description, or maybe just click my channel. I honestly think that part one was the only video I've ever made on YouTube anyway, so shouldn't be hard to find. Part one was why do polls matter? Why should you trust them in light of the 2016 election when they were so wrong, or were they? So 2016 polls, I just dived deep into that in part one, basically what went wrong and what's changed since then. So this was the 2016 presidential election results. Donald Trump won. And so some of the big key things that we went over is essentially these states in the upper Midwest, Trump had to win them all, and he did. So the ones that are shaded are the ones that he flipped. So Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, he flipped all of those and flipped Florida as well. All right, so he really ran the gambit in 2016. In 2018, the Dems managed to flip the House, gaining a lot of seats. They have 235 to like 200 right now, I want to say. And they mainly did that by running moderate Democrats. As we enter 2020, it is November 1st. Election is in 2 days. So what is the forecast? Well, coffee. Yeah, I know it's like 4:35 and I shouldn't be drinking coffee, but mind your own business. Biden is favored to win the election. And you might be surprised on simply how much he is favored to win it. 538 gives him an 89 in 100 chance to win. If you remember from part one, Clinton was in the 70s. So do not take that as gospel, just as I said in the last video that, whatever 71% wasn't 100%, 89% isn't 100% either. However, Trump there's going to have to be an even larger polling error than there was in 2016. And that seems likely, especially considering many of the issues that we had in 2016 have been rectified. Now, perhaps there's even bigger issues in 2020 that pollsters have not accounted for. And it's possible, especially with the increased turnout. There's been a crazy turnout. Texas has already had, 9 million people vote? That's more than they had total vote in 2016. I want to say 65%. Okay, so if you take the total election numbers in America from 2016, we've already reached 65% of that through early voting. But we'll get into the demographics of who that perhaps benefits. But if you look here for vote margins, in order for Trump to win, okay, he's going to have to win all of these states that are currently neck and neck or going to Biden. So Jordan, Jesus Christ. Georgia is pretty split right now. The second Maine and the second Nebraska, they're the only two states that split their electoral votes. Everybody else is winner take all. He's going to have to win Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. He's going to have to win all of those. Now, it's possible, he could sneak in like Nevada and Wisconsin, but again, in order to win these states down here, there's going to have to be more of a polling error than there was in 2016. Okay, and 2016 was a rather big polling error, at least in terms of the states. But we discussed all of that in part one. So if you find that slightly interesting, watch part one. So when you look at the popular vote here, Biden is up about 8% in the popular vote. You contrast that to what the polls were right before 2016, in the same weekend, like November 1st, Hillary was up 4 to 5 points. And remember that graphic that I showed you in part one, whereas if you're up 8 points nationally, then you've got a pretty darn good 80 to 90% chance of winning, right? And that's a big difference than being up 2 to 3 points nationally. And we talked about why that is in part one. So according to 538 and Nate Silver, it's actually more likely that Biden wins handily, like in a landslide, than it is for Trump to win closely. And that's a pretty big deal. We're going to dive really into the nitty gritty of some of these states in a bit. But one of the things that I want to do is talk about some key demographic trends in America and why that doesn't bode well for Trump or the Republicans. Then we're going to get into some of the issues and also take a look at other various polling. You know what? Let's just go ahead and look at some of the other polling instead of just looking at 538 now, and then we'll dive into the other stuff. So here's 538 polling aggregate. Here's the Cook Political Report. So when we look at the leaning Democrat states, okay, that we have here, just compared to lean Republican, this is a big deal, right? And you have like these toss-up states that were pretty significantly lean Republican or likely Republican previously. So let's just look at Georgia, Iowa, and Texas, for example. So these are the House results. All right, Texas, 9 points in 2016. Okay, Iowa, about the same, 9 points. Georgia, 5 points. The fact that Trump won Texas and Iowa by like 9 points and Georgia by 5, and that various metrics have them as toss-up states is a big deal. Now, I think that, well, we'll get into all these specifically, okay? I don't want to, man, it is so hard not to go on these tangents. You should feel really, really sorry for my students having to deal with this. Okay, on like a daily basis. Okay, so here's another one, Real Clear Politics. By the way, if you want to like participate in my little Google form competition, Real Clear Politics and 270 to win, you can play around with the numbers here and then just fill out the Google form. So here on 270 to win, they use the 538 election forecast that I showed you earlier. And so you can go and change the various states and give them to Trump, give them to Biden, so on and so forth, play around with it and see where it goes. The better map to probably do this is this 538 simulation model, where you can actually click on them and then it automatically adjusts based on what you think. So if you think that Florida goes red, then it automatically calculates how much it changes the percentages of each person. And I'll link that in the description, but this is pretty amazing. And it's a lot of fun to play around with it. So where are we at? All right, so let's dive into basically the electoral makeup of America and how it's changed and why that bodes well for Democrats. So if you're watching this as one of my AP Gov students, all of this information is really important for one of the units. Basically, if you just watch this video, then you know almost everything you need to know for 2 of the units. Okay, so America, it's becoming less white, less Christian, and more educated. Each of those 3 factors, okay, is going to give the Democratic Party an advantage. As you see here, most minorities increasingly vote for the Democratic Party, and overall, you're having less and less white people make up the electoral map, right? So, big indicator for Democrats. 81% of the Republican Party is a shrinking demographic. Now, the aging electorate. Again, most of the Republican Party is getting votes from older Americans. Now, older Americans turn out and vote at way higher numbers than young adults do, 18 to 29. But what we've seen in the 2020 election is a much greater enthusiasm for voting. And if the early voting trends are any indication, according to TargetSmart, which I'm unfamiliar with them, I don't know how accurate this is, but both them and the U.S. Elections Project said that more young people have already turned out to vote early than total young people voted in 2016. If that's accurate, and it seems that it may be, just looking at really specific data from like a handful of areas like Austin in particular, then again, that's good for Biden, good for the Democratic Party, because young people, as you can see here, ages 18 to 29, lean Democrat, right, by 19 to 13. So a 6 percentage point advantage for Democrats in that age group. Next, we talked last video. We didn't talk. I talked last video about the split and the diploma divide. Increasingly, people with a college degree are voting for the Democratic Party. So you look at this 10 and 19 here for Republicans versus 19 and 22 for Democrats. Okay, and you can see that it's increased from 04 to 12 to 19. So increasingly what's happening is high school diploma and less voting Republicans, and college degree and post-grad are voting Democrats. Again, America is getting more educated. Finally, the Christian divide. So America in general is becoming less religious, less Christian to be more specific. So when you look at the map of total white evangelical Protestants, 18% total, right? 32 of that is going to go Republican. Very few white evangelical Protestants are going to vote this way. But when you look at how it's shrunk from 21 to 18, and then white non-evangelical Protestants, 17 to 13%, white Catholics, 16 to 12, there's that drop off here. Now, the other thing that's going to be a factor is that it appears, according to polling data, that Biden is peeling away some of that white Catholic vote. Okay, he's not taking away pretty much any white evangelical Protestants. Okay, that Trump's got that. But when you look at white Catholics, Biden being a Catholic himself, he's peeling away some of that vote, just as he's peeling away some of the older vote that didn't vote for Clinton. But these are pretty general demographic trends in America that if they continue and there's no change to the platforms, not just for 2020, 2024, 2028, you're looking at an increasing Democratic blue wave. All right, let's look at, what do we want to look at? Well, we need to take a look at the gender gap, because the gender gap was big in 2016, and it's even bigger now. So here's the Wall Street Journal and NBC News poll for 2020. Only 35% of women who prefer Trump, right? Whereas they prefer Biden, 58%. That's a big gap. And in another poll, I want to say it was Gallup, they had 57% of men preferred Trump, but 54% of women preferred Biden. Again, big gender gap. And you see that pretty much across all divides, whether it's education level, race, or what have you. So like African Americans, though they're not a monolith, they're going to be upper 80s, 90% in support of Biden. Trump, I want to say, got 14% of black men in 2016, whereas he only got like 1 to 3% of black women. He's actually probably going to get a higher percentage of black men and Latino men in 2020 than he did in 2016. But if that's offset by the growing gender gap, it may not matter much. All right, let's look at some specifics, if you're still here, to where people, how people view each of the candidates, and then we'll break it down into those individual swing states and what the latest polls have to say. So, right now, and so this is all stuff that's also different from 2016. And one of the biggest differences from 2016 is we have a global pandemic. We didn't have a global pandemic in 2016. All right. So when you look at the condition of the economy, this is Fox News polls. Fox News polls are really reliable, quality polling firm. The other thing, and I don't think I mentioned this in the first video, many of the news departments are completely separate from the polling departments. And so like the Fox News polls actually skew a little liberal. If you compare them to some other polls, they've got like, I want to say they had a poll come out yesterday, and they've got Biden up like 7 points in Florida, which is on the high end. So Fox News polls, condition of the economy, you can see all of this shifting right here, and same for coronavirus, whether it's under control. So you look at September to now, 11% increase and not at all. Okay, even though there's an increase in people viewing the economy as better, that's not enough to perhaps offset the increase in COVID cases, but we'll look at that more. The other thing is Trump's big win over Hillary had a lot to do with how people viewed him on the economy. The fact that these numbers are pretty close for the economy, and then a big gap here on coronavirus, is good for Biden, okay? Because Hillary wasn't getting those. Let me zoom this in more. When you look at personality traits, okay, in almost all of these personality traits, Biden is winning. So what cares about you, how honest he is, who's more corrupt, who's close to extremists. The one that Trump does better in is the stands up for his beliefs, right? Tells it like it is type of mentality. Those are some of the numbers for 2020. We're going to dive in a little deeper right here. So you see this right here, and this goes back to the demographics, right? More people saying the election really matters, so expect a much higher turnout. A much higher turnout will benefit Democrats. And the GOP knows that. That's why there are so many lawsuits to try to keep and limit the counting, the ease of access to the ballot, the numbers and ways that you can vote and vote early, because they know the higher the turnout, the more it benefits Democrats. All right. So again, we've got this big college divide, and I'm going to keep reinforcing that, especially for my AP students. People with a college degree are way more likely to vote for Biden than those without a college degree. And to harken back to part 1 of the video, now pollsters in 2020 are weighting that. Okay, they learned the lesson from 2016. Obviously, there's a gender gap too. Now, why are people voting for Biden? They're not. They're voting against Trump. So this is one of the things why some of Trump's messaging and attacking Biden isn't working. One of his main attacks is that he's a socialist. That has not really registered with independent and moderate voters. It's almost as if they developed a strategy to run against Bernie Sanders and they never wavered from it, and it's hurting because people aren't really buying it, number one. But number two, the main reason why they're voting for Biden is because it's a vote against Trump. So you have that. Now, what could hurt Democrats, and we'll get into this more later, maybe, unless I forget or just get tired of talking, is how people vote. Particularly for election day, there could be really big swings, like in Florida in particular. They voted by mail for years and years and years, but they're going to count their mail-in ballots like first, perhaps. So perhaps at the beginning of the night, you're going to see a huge Biden lead, because if you just look here, vote by mail, Democrats are way more likely. If you count those ballots first early in the night, it may look like Biden has a giant lead in Florida when he really doesn't. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Whereas in other states, it may be the opposite, right? Like, so in Pennsylvania, they count their votes a little bit differently than in Florida, and they're actually allowed, the Supreme Court allowed them to count their votes days after. So as long as you're postmarked your ballot and put it in the mail before November 3rd, it can arrive late and it will be counted. So we're not going to know who wins Pennsylvania until probably a few days after, or weeks after. It's certainly going to be one of the last states. Whereas in Wisconsin, the Supreme Court sort of did the opposite on a GOP court case, which is that even if you have your mail-in ballot postmarked before November 3rd, if it doesn't get there until after November 3rd, it doesn't count. And so you could have voted yesterday, you could have voted Friday or Thursday and dropped it off in the mail, and it's postmarked for that date. But if you have inefficiency of the mail system, or for whatever reason it's not delivered till later, too bad. And so that may cause issues for Democratic voters. The other thing is, it's way more likely that people mess up mail-in and absentee ballots. You sign your name Angie when your name's Angelique. Perhaps it gets thrown out. If you put your birth date instead of the current date, or vice versa, maybe it gets thrown out. There's all types of small little reasons that your mail-in ballot could get thrown out that simply would not happen if you vote in person. So that could be an issue, but the likelihood of that affecting like thousands and thousands of ballots and then affecting them in the states that matter, it gets less likely. So let's talk about the top issues for Trump supporters versus Biden supporters and in totality, right? So Trump supporters and Republicans in general care way more about the economy than Biden supporters. And that divides even more on healthcare, right? The public option is really popular. Now, despite what some of Trump's attacks are, Biden does not support, and his policy platform says as much, getting rid of private insurance. Now, perhaps you don't believe that. Perhaps, you think something else. Doesn't really matter, right? And I'm not going to, who the hell knows, right? The point is, in the Democratic primary, and according to everything he said, he supports a public option, which is that pretty much anyone can gain access to government insurance if they want it, and if you don't want it, keep your private insurance. 65% of Americans agree with that policy. And so if you're looking for health care, those people who care most about health care are probably going to support Biden. You couple with the fact that the Trump administration is trying to strike down ACA, which would end pre-existing conditions, and they've never released a plan or like an alternate plan for Obamacare. Trump has stated for years that he has a plan and he'll release it in weeks. He never has. So if you're looking for that healthcare vote for independents, they are probably likely to go Biden. And if you looked at that Fox News poll that I showed earlier, the economy isn't as big as a boon to Trump as perhaps it was previously. Now, here's the big difference: the coronavirus outbreak. Now, if you lean Democratic, you care a lot about it. If you lean Trump, you don't. Okay? However, in totality, 62% of Americans rated it as very important. And Trump gets very bad marks for his handling of the pandemic across the board for people. Again, I'm not trying to say this is my opinion. I'm saying that's what the polling data says. Whether you look at CBS, ABC, Siena College, Monmouth, Quinnipiac, Wall Street Journal, Pew, Gallup, it doesn't matter. People do not think he has handled it well, and people trust Biden to handle it more effectively. And let's actually let's dive into that a little bit more. So that number is actually decreased a lot for Trump voters from August to October. That's despite of the fact of there being huge increases in the number of cases in America since August. And you look at this decline here, it's not nearly as much or as sharp as the total decline. So when we start looking into COVID hotspots, one of the reasons why, hold on. Okay, that coffee's getting cold and it's pretty nasty. Look at Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a massive increase in cases, and not just in cases, but number of deaths and hospitalizations. Michigan is the same, parts of Pennsylvania. So when you're looking at some of these key states, particularly for Wisconsin, and why they're trending towards Biden so much, that is why. And just to give you like another example here, okay, so here's Johns Hopkins. Let's take a look at Wisconsin. And remember that poll, that was from October. That changed from August to like October 1st. But like, look at the number of cases that they've had in the increase since the beginning of October to now in Wisconsin. And, you know, you can take another swing state here, and let's change it to Michigan. Just a crazy exponential increase. Pennsylvania. And so if you're looking, and this isn't just due to increased testing, right? Like it outpaces the increase for testing. And so when people are going to vote on Tuesday, and Trump is holding rallies and saying that we're rounding the corner, that, you know, it's going to be gone in weeks, that they're handling it well, and you see that rate of increased cases, and you're an independent voter, you are likely statistically to vote for Biden. Now, one interesting sort of tangent tidbit to this is the way even conservatives view the pandemic, depending on their main source of news. And I just find this fascinating. So if you look at the approval rating for Trump's handling of the pandemic, as I said, right, overall it's like 35%. And for Republicans, it's like 78% of Republicans think he has handled it well. That gap is just monstrous. But the other really interesting gap is Republicans whose main source of news is Fox versus Republicans whose main source of news is not Fox. Okay, and like this gap is just like the Fox News effect, particularly like Hannity and Carlson. It's just monumental. I mean, look right here for the trust for pandemic information. So like if you are a Fox News Republican, okay, you are very likely to trust Trump on COVID information, way more likely than the top, infectious disease expert in the nation. But that that gap is way less right here. And then when you look at the overall number, okay, it's just completely different. And so again, the pandemic and COVID is a big factor in this election. Um, that's just another statistics. Okay, what man? How long have I been talking? I don't know who's still listening to this. All right, let's look at the latest results. Did I show this? Okay, I'm going to show this. I don't know if I showed this last time. If the polls are as wrong as they were in 2016, this graph puts it into perspective. So, like, even with the 2016 polling error, Biden is still winning this election. It would have to be, again, a massive, massive polling error for Trump to win. And again, 10% chance of winning is not 0%. So here are the polls that were added today for the general election. Some polls have come out that are showing Trump with a bump, but overall there's no real tightening. The Seltzer poll came out in Iowa earlier today that had Trump doing a little better in Iowa than some of the other polls, but there hasn't been much of a change. One of the interesting polls was the Fox News poll that came out the other day that had a 54% disapproval rating, and that was released a couple days ago. All right, so let's take a look at the individual maps here. All right, so let's start with Florida. Okay, actually, you know what? Let's do it this way. So here, New York Times, this came out yesterday, and it's a really cool map. It's basically the battlegrounds. Oh, well, you can see the title, Battlegrounds within Battlegrounds. So we're going to take like a really close look at county by county. By the way, look how red this map is. But it also just goes to show you, like, land does not win elections, right? Like, Trump could have almost all of this be red, but it's not people, it's land. Like, look at eastern Montana. Like, only 12 people live there, like, total. There's like 800 cows and 12 people, so, you know. All right. So let's look at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona. You know, what's really weird here is I'm surprised they don't have Ohio on this map. So let's look at what Ohio is up to real quick, since I'm actually I think Trump wins Ohio, honestly. I almost think that Trump wins Iowa and Florida as well. But we'll see. Okay, so let's dive into Florida first. All right, so right now Biden has about a 2-point lead in Florida. Now here's one problem for Biden is Miami-Dade. The problem is, so we talked about like record turnout. However, the early voting turnout in Miami-Dade, which is like, largest city in Miami, heavy Democratic support, was lower in 2020 than it was in 2016. They have, for whatever reason, actually, I'm pretty sure I know the reason, but they have not been able to get out the young black vote or the young Latino vote. And so even though those demographics are increasing, they haven't been able to turn them out, like in early voting. And a lot of this, and we'll talk about it, isn't necessarily about the split as much as it is voter turnout. You could say that if you had higher black turnout in Milwaukee and Philadelphia for Clinton, then she would have won. Like, if the black turnout in Milwaukee and Philadelphia was the same as it was for Obama in 2008, 2012, Hillary would have won, right? Those elections were within 1%. And Hillary did not run effective campaigns there. In 2016, I think she visited Wisconsin once, which was in April. She visited Pennsylvania twice, once in June and once in October. That's like insanely bad campaigning. If you really want to know, you can read the book Shattered, and it goes into detail of just like how poorly the Clinton campaigned. Anyway, Biden's going to have to increase turnout in Miami-Dade. One of the reasons why I think they're not getting turnout is because the Biden campaign canceled all door-to-door like knocking until like very, very recently because of pandemic concerns. And so they had very few people on the ground actually going door-to-door to try to turn out the vote. Just in retrospect, a really stupid decision. They're trying to rectify it. We'll see if they get the turnout, but if they are lagging in turnout Miami-Dade, then they're not going to win Florida. And it doesn't, because Biden's not going to make up enough of the vote in other places for it to matter. So we can look at here in St. Petersburg for that flip. That's a bit of swing one. Osceola County, a lot more Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, but typically the Puerto Ricans aren't as likely to vote Democratic as some other Hispanic subgroups. Also, they haven't been able to get turnout really there. Another, I want to talk about Florida and the villages real quick. So when you look at Florida, oh, come on, county by county, right here, let's see, in Orlando, Sumter County, right here, is where the Villages is. The Villages is the largest retirement community in America, 120,000 retirees. They have like 50 golf courses. It's crazy. So 68% Trump, huge enthusiasm there in the retirement communities. However, there is some data to basically say that that Biden is peeling away those people, and there are some shy Biden support there. The Daily did a great podcast with interviews with lots of people from the Villages and other retirement areas in Florida. That was interesting. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot about this map. Dude, check out who am I talking to? Check out all of these red arrows. And that's the shift from 2012 to 2016. I mean, domination in the Midwest. That's like not likely to happen, especially when you just look at the 2018 results. All right, let's go up to North Carolina. Union County. More and more, so this is like Charlotte. One of the big reasons why the Dems flipped the House in 2018 and that Biden's doing very well now is suburbs, particularly suburban women. Suburban white women voted Democratic in a much larger number than in 2016, and in 2016 that was even larger than 2014. So 2020, again, if it's going to come down to anything, it's going to be white suburban women, like white women in college degrees, because you have that diploma divide and you have that gender gap. And when you just account for both of those, if they show up in large numbers, then it's going to be a pretty big victory for Biden. All right, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, when you look at it, it's all about really Philly and Pittsburgh here. And then some swing counties. So like you look at Pennsylvania here, and Trump really outperformed his expectations here in suburban Pittsburgh, not Philly. But what is interesting, if you're talking about this area, is in 2018, you had modern Democrat who actually flipped this House seat. Connor Lamb ran and flipped this House seat over here. When you look at suburban Philadelphia, he's going to have to outpace Clinton here, and he probably is, according to polling, and then also like what I said earlier with the gender gap and the college gap. Philly, it's all about turnout. All about turnout. That's what it's going to be about. All right. I think you get the point, because I mean it's pretty much the same going to be in like Michigan and Wisconsin. You've got to turn out in the cities, and then it's just ultimately going to be about white working class and whether Biden is peeling those people away from Trump. But yeah, just looking at the numbers, the reason why the map is so difficult for Trump is, again, those states that he won by large margins in 2016, he's either losing them or they're razor thin. Okay, now I do not think the Democrats are going to pull away Texas, though it's going to be inevitable at some point. So if they don't do it in 2020, it'll happen in 2024. Iowa, the Seltzer poll came out today that showed Trump up by a few percentage points, I think 7. I'll roll with that. I think he keeps these 3. Man, Georgia, I really don't know. I think Trump actually keeps Georgia, and I think he can win Florida as well. So Trump, but again, Trump can win these and still lose. I think Biden gets Arizona, and I think he gets Pennsylvania too, especially being a guy who lived there in Scranton until he was 10, being a senator from Delaware. Delaware didn't have a major television network, so if Biden would try to talk to Delawareans, Delawareites, Delawareans, whatever, it would go through the Philadelphia station. So when he gave interviews, it would be on Philly local news, and so people from Pennsylvania are very familiar with him. I mean, he was in the Senate for 95 years, right? I mean, Biden is 134 years old, so yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Okay, fill out, if you're one of my students, fill out your Google form prediction. If you're not one of my students, wow, you should get an award for listening to me this long. If you have any questions, if you're a student, put them in Google Classroom or comment on YouTube. If you're not a student and you're another teacher, comment on the Facebook post in the AP Government Teachers Group, or leave it in YouTube, or personal friend or whatever, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. Like it if you like it. You don't need to subscribe. I'm probably not going to make any more of these videos. Maybe I'll make one after the election. I don't know. Yeah, okay. I think that's pretty much it. Laters. Not laters, because I forgot to mention something. Okay, there's 2 important cool links that you might want to check out for election night. Right here, when to expect election results in every state. As I said, like Florida, you can probably expect, right? They should be very fast. They've been doing mail-in polling for years and years and years. They've been counting mail-in ballots. So they'll be ready to go, right? You can expect those results pretty soon. Now, when I say pretty soon, I mean it might not get called until much later in the night if it's really close, but you can start getting an accurate idea pretty early on. Whereas like Pennsylvania, you're not gonna know November 3rd. You're just not gonna know. It's not gonna happen. So this is really cool because it actually breaks it down like state by state, and like it will say like even like Arizona, like the first batch of results may be shifting heavily Democratic, right? Because they're going to be early in absentee votes, and they're counting the mail-in votes first. And then like it goes down into all the timing and stuff like that. So I'll put this link in the description of the video. The other thing is this link right here, which sort of you can go um, time, like it breaks it down like what states to watch for, like at what time of night. I mean, I will be Zooming with my students, and this is a pretty cool little thing to follow along with. I'll probably stay up all night till 3 or 4 a.m. But you know, I doubt you will because you're not a super nerd like me. All right, now we're done.